Liam Carter had always lived a life most people could only dream of. The kind of life where money was no object, where the latest tech gadgets and designer clothes were just a given, and where the best restaurants were a weekly hangout. But none of this made him feel special. No, what made Liam feel alive was the power of his words and the laughter he could provoke from his friends, especially when it was at someone else's expense. It was a Saturday evening, the air crisp with the promise of autumn, and Liam was sitting in the exclusive corner booth of Le Cirque, the most upscale restaurant in town. His friends, Jason and Tyler, flanked him, sipping on their expensive cocktails, eyes gleaming with the anticipation of yet another night of indulgence. The place was buzzing with conversation and clinking glasses, but Liam had no intention of paying attention to any of it. No, his eyes were fixed on the man seated a few tables away, a man who, despite being in a room filled with celebrities and dignitaries, seemed completely out of place. It was none other than Keanu Reeves. Liam had seen the actor in a handful of movies, but to him, Keanu was just another washed-up star who had once been famous and now, like all celebrities, had to make a living by pretending to be someone he wasn't. Watching the man, alone at his table, quietly sipping water as if he didn't have millions in the bank, was almost too much for Liam to ignore. "Look at him," Liam sneered, nudging Jason. "What a joke. He's picking up a loaf of bread like it's a matter of life and death." "Seriously, who does that?" Jason snickered, while Tyler laughed louder. "Yeah, right? Like he's just one of us." Liam's voice grew louder, knowing Keanu could hear him now. "I mean, come on. He's literally bending over to pick up a fallen piece of bread. What, is he too humble for a waiter to do that?" The table erupted in laughter. To Liam, this was the kind of humor that fueled his status. If he could get everyone else to laugh, to see his perspective, then he was in control. The actor's humility, his refusal to act like a star in front of everyone, was the perfect target. But there was something about the way Keanu moved, something about the way he gracefully bent down, that made the room feel just a little bit smaller. Liam didn't understand it. Why would anyone, especially someone with Keanu's fame, stoop to pick up something so trivial? In the moment, Liam's mockery felt powerful. He enjoyed being the center of attention, the one whose opinions mattered. But what Liam didn't realize was that the attention he sought wasn't coming from the people around him. It was coming from a place deep inside himself, a need to feel validated by the world around him, even if that meant belittling someone else. His laughter echoed throughout the room as Keanu stood up, wiping his hands. And then, just as Liam was about to make another cutting remark, the unexpected happened. Keanu calmly turned, made eye contact with him, and smiled, genuinely, without a hint of annoyance. A moment of silence passed between them, and for a brief second, Liam thought he saw something in Keanu's eyes, something that made him question the very nature of his own laughter. Just as quickly as the moment passed, Keanu stood up, walked toward the front of the restaurant, and with a simple nod, paid for everyone's meal, homeless people included, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, unnoticed by everyone else. Liam froze. His mouth, which had been ready for more ridicule, suddenly felt dry. He didn't know why he couldn't look away from the actor, or why his laughter had died in his throat. Keanu's quiet generosity had turned the tables in a way that Liam hadn't expected. This wasn't just a humble gesture. It was something far more powerful than anything Liam had ever experienced. And that was when Liam realized something had shifted in the room. And it wasn't just the way Keanu had picked up a fallen piece of bread. It was something far bigger. Liam Carter had never questioned his place in the world. Born into wealth, he had been pampered and coddled by his parents, who prided themselves on their image as one of the city's most influential families. Money was a tool, a weapon, and a shield, all rolled into one. For Liam, it wasn't just about what he could buy. It was about how he could make others see him, how he could shape his reality with the swipe of a credit card and the power of his social media presence. He'd always known that his life was different. At school, his classmates would marvel at his new car, his latest tech gadgets, and his designer clothes. They'd laugh at his jokes and hang on his every word, eager for an invitation to the next big party his parents were hosting. To them, Liam was the epitome of success, the kind of guy who had it all. But none of that mattered to Liam. His friendships, shallow and transactional, had little depth beyond what they could provide him: attention, approval, and the sense of superiority that made him feel untouchable. The Carter family had built its fortune through real estate and investments, and Liam had been groomed to follow in his father's footsteps. But where his father was serious, calculating, and ambitious, Liam had inherited a different set of priorities. He wasn't interested in building wealth through hard work or innovation. Instead, he took his cue from his social circle. Luxury was the only goal, and status was the ultimate measure of success. His mother, Veronica Carter, was the perfect example of this lifestyle. A former socialite, she spent her days attending galas, throwing extravagant parties, and making sure her family's reputation was as pristine as their multi-million-dollar estate. Veronica's love for her son was clear, but it came with a price. She expected Liam to live up to the family legacy, to represent the image of success they had worked so hard to build. Emotions, vulnerability, and humility weren't part of the equation. Then there was Robert Carter, his father. A man of few words but endless expectations, Robert had always been distant, more focused on the family's public image than on nurturing Liam's emotional growth. Whenever Liam failed or showed weakness, Robert's response was always the same: don't make a scene. Fix it, or forget about it. Robert's idea of love was wrapped in material gifts: an expensive watch here, a new car there, but never in the form of a comforting word or a gesture of understanding. Liam's closest relationships were always with his friends who were just as entitled and disconnected from reality as he was. Jason and Tyler, his best friends, had been by his side since middle school. They weren't interested in deeper connections or personal growth. Instead, their friendship was based on mutual benefit, status, parties, and mutual admiration for their own privilege. The only family member who had ever attempted to show Liam a different side of life was his grandfather, Harrison Carter. A quiet, humble man who had made his fortune through hard work and perseverance, Harrison had always been a stark contrast to Liam's parents. Despite their differences, the two shared an unspoken bond, one that transcended wealth and status. But after Harrison's passing when Liam was just 12, the opportunity to learn from him vanished. Since then, Liam had been left with little guidance on how to navigate life beyond his parents' surface-level expectations. As a result, Liam had grown up believing that the world was his for the taking. His every whim was catered to, his mistakes were ignored, and his success was measured by what he owned and who he knew. He had never had to face the reality of hard work or sacrifice because his money shielded him from every challenge that came his way. His path was clear, and as far as he was concerned, it was the only way. But beneath this seemingly perfect life, there was an emptiness that Liam had never been able to name. He filled that emptiness with things: cars, clothes, parties, but none of it ever seemed to fill the void. In the quiet moments, when the noise of his luxurious life died down, Liam would occasionally feel a strange loneliness creeping in. He pushed those thoughts away, convincing himself that he didn't need anything more than what he had. But as Liam sat there in Le Cirque, watching Keanu Reeves pay for a meal he didn't need to pay for, something inside of him stirred, something that he had long buried beneath the weight of his possessions and his pride. A feeling he couldn't quite shake. He didn't know it yet, but that feeling was the beginning of the end of everything he thought he knew about life, wealth, and happiness. And it was only going to get stronger. The rest of the night felt different for Liam. He couldn't shake the memory of Keanu's smile, the calm, genuine expression that seemed to cut right through the laughter that had echoed around the restaurant just moments before. His friends, oblivious to the shift in Liam's mood, were still buzzing with excitement, but something had changed in him. The laughter, the mockery, it all felt shallow now. But Liam wasn't ready to confront that feeling yet. No, instead, he doubled down, determined to prove to himself, and to everyone else, that he was still the same Liam Carter, the guy who could make anyone laugh, the guy who didn't let anything get to him. "You guys see that?" Liam said, breaking the silence as they left the restaurant. "Keanu just threw money around like it was nothing. What a joke." Jason and Tyler snickered, following his lead. "Yeah, who does that? Like we need his charity." "It's almost pathetic," Jason added, adjusting his jacket and smirking. "Exactly." Liam continued, feeling the need to keep the momentum going. It's like he's trying to make us feel bad for him. But I'm not buying it. I don't need some washed-up actor pretending to be humble. Deep down, a nagging part of Liam knew it wasn't just about the money. It wasn't even about Keanu's generosity. It was about control. Liam couldn't stand the idea of someone making him question the way he viewed the world, especially someone he saw as a has-been celebrity. His laughter, his mocking, was his way of keeping things in check, of making sure that no one, especially not Keanu Reeves, could disrupt his carefully constructed reality. Over the next few days, the incident at the restaurant stayed with Liam. He tried to brush it off, but something about Keanu's demeanor, the calm way he'd interacted with him, gnawed at him. He didn't expect it, didn't want it. Yet, every time he closed his eyes, he saw Keanu bending down to pick up that loaf of bread, not out of obligation, but out of genuine humility. And that smile, it was as if Keanu had silently challenged everything Liam thought he knew about kindness and generosity. But rather than let this realization sink in, Liam pushed it further away. He told himself that he was fine, that everything was just the way it should be. He focused on his next big party, the next big purchase, the next step in his life where he would have everything he ever wanted. But then came the night when the conversation shifted again. It started with a simple question from Tyler. "Liam, did you see Keanu's interview on The Late Show?" Tyler asked, taking a swig of his drink as they lounged at Liam's house one evening, the TV casting a glow over the room. Liam's chest tightened, but he forced a grin. "No, I didn't. Why would I? It's just more of him playing the part, right?" Jason laughed, but Tyler didn't seem to share Liam's disdain. Actually, it was kind of interesting. He talked about why he chooses to help people, why he never flaunts his wealth, said something about how life's more than just what you have. It was, I dunno, kind of deep. Liam's jaw clenched. "Deep?" he scoffed, trying to sound nonchalant. "The guy's acting. He's playing a role, that's all." But deep down, a flicker of doubt danced in his mind. Was Keanu playing a role, or was he something Liam didn't understand? It wasn't long before the rumors began circulating. Keanu's latest act of kindness had gone viral, paying for a meal at a restaurant in LA for a group of homeless people, covering their food, drinks, and even the tips. People were calling him a hero. Liam's friends couldn't stop talking about it, and the more they did, the more Liam's irritation grew. "Who cares about that?" Liam spat, as the conversation picked up in another one of their group chats. "It's all for show. What's he gonna do next? Start a GoFundMe for himself?" But even as he said it, a part of him knew that wasn't true. He couldn't ignore the fact that Keanu wasn't doing this for attention. He wasn't posting pictures on Instagram or writing long captions about how great he was. He was simply giving, and it made Liam uneasy in a way he couldn't explain. Then, the next bombshell dropped. Liam and his friends were at an exclusive club when they ran into one of their old acquaintances, Emily, who was now working with a non-profit organization. Emily had always been the do-gooder in their circle, and Liam had always dismissed her as naive. "You guys see what Keanu's doing lately?" Emily asked, a hint of admiration in her voice. "He just donated a huge sum to a homeless shelter in New York City. Not for publicity, not for a movie role, just because he wanted to help. I can't believe how humble he is." Liam froze. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered under his breath. "Yeah," Emily continued, unaware of Liam's growing discomfort. "He even takes time out of his day to help out at the shelter. It's really inspiring." Liam's frustration bubbled to the surface. "Inspiring? Please. Anyone can donate money. It's just a way to feel good about themselves." But even as he said it, he could hear the doubt creeping in. Was it really that simple? Was it just about money? Or was there something more to it? Was there something about Keanu's quiet generosity that Liam didn't understand? Something that, deep down, he might actually envy? The more Liam tried to dismiss it, the more it stuck to him. His mockery wasn't having the desired effect anymore. Keanu's actions were forcing him to confront something he wasn't ready to face. The emptiness of his own life, the hollow nature of his wealth, and the growing realization that he had been living in a bubble that was about to burst. Liam had always believed that he was in control of his life. He had the money, the friends, the status, What more could he need? His world revolved around his ability to dominate social circles, make people laugh, and keep up appearances. But in the days following his encounter with Keanu, something began to gnaw at him, something he couldn't easily push away. At first, he tried to dismiss the discomfort. It was just a brief moment of weakness, he told himself. A celebrity being generous didn't change anything. He still had everything he needed, everything he wanted. But as the days wore on, the nagging feeling only grew stronger. It wasn't just Keanu's act of kindness that bothered him. It was the realization that he had never truly known what it meant to give, to sacrifice, or to live for something greater than himself. So, Liam did what he did best. He distracted himself. He threw himself into his usual routine. Parties, new purchases, and the thrill of being in control of his surroundings. But no matter how much he surrounded himself with superficial distractions, the question lingered. Why had Keanu's actions shaken him so much? One evening, after yet another extravagant night out, Liam found himself alone in his penthouse apartment, sitting on the balcony, staring out at the sprawling city skyline. The hum of the city below was familiar, comforting even. But tonight, it felt distant, like he was watching someone else's life unfold, not his own. For the first time, the grandeur of his apartment, the sleekness of his car, the designer clothes that filled his closet, none of it mattered. The next morning, he woke up to another round of social media posts from his friends, praising Keanu's latest charity work. They had all seen the viral videos of the actor spending time with underprivileged kids, playing basketball with them in a park, laughing, and just being present. And then there was the one video where Keanu, without a word, helped a woman with groceries, carrying them to her car and smiling at her as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Liam's frustration boiled over. How does he do it? He muttered to himself. What's so special about him? Why is everyone treating him like some saint? That afternoon, Liam drove to one of his usual hangouts, trying to lose himself in the noise. But as he passed by a small park, something caught his eye. A group of people gathered around an older man who was sitting on the ground, offering bread and coffee to a few homeless individuals. There, standing beside him, was none other than Keanu Reeves. Liam's pulse quickened, and for a moment, he considered turning the car around, avoiding the encounter altogether. But something, some force, compelled him to stop. Slowly, he pulled the car to the curb and stepped out, watching from a distance as Keanu smiled and exchanged words with the people around him. There was no camera crew, no crowd of fans. Just Keanu, standing in the middle of the park, making a difference without any expectation of recognition. For the first time, Liam saw the actor not through the lens of fame or wealth, but through the lens of a man who genuinely cared. He wasn't making a spectacle of his good deeds. He wasn't drawing attention to himself. He was simply helping. Liam's heart pounded in his chest. He stood there for what felt like hours, watching, trying to understand what had eluded him for so long. He had always viewed generosity as a transaction, something you did to get recognition or admiration. But here was Keanu, giving without asking for anything in return, giving for the sake of giving. A voice inside him whispered, "Maybe this is what you've been missing." Without thinking, Liam walked toward the group, his feet moving almost of their own accord. As he got closer, he felt a strange mixture of self-consciousness and curiosity. What would Keanu say? Would he even notice him? To his surprise, Keanu looked up, his warm smile greeting him as if they were old friends. "Hey," Keanu said, his voice calm and inviting. "It's good to see you again." Liam froze. "You remember me?" Keanu's smile never wavered. "Of course I do. You were at Lou's Cirque, right? You had some strong opinions that night." Liam laughed awkwardly, his usual confidence slipping away. "Yeah, I, wasn't exactly kind. I didn't get why you do something like that." Keanu nodded, still smiling. "It's okay. Sometimes it takes a little while for people to see the bigger picture." He paused for a moment, as if weighing his words. Generosity, kindness, it's not about the applause or the cameras. It's about making a difference, even if it's just for one person. Liam swallowed hard, the weight of Keanu's words settling in his chest. He had spent his whole life chasing approval, seeking validation from others, But here was a man who had it all and yet chose to give without expectation. "So, this is what you do?" Liam asked, gesturing to the people around them. Keanu chuckled softly. "I do what I can, but I'm not the only one. There are people everywhere doing small things to help. You just have to pay attention." Liam felt a rush of emotion he hadn't expected. The world he had known, the world of privilege, parties, and luxury, felt suddenly shallow, empty. And yet, standing here with Keanu, surrounded by people who had nothing, he felt alive. Not in the way his expensive cars or designer clothes made him feel, but in a deeper, more meaningful way. It was as if the weight of the world had lifted, and for the first time, he was seeing things clearly. "Maybe," Liam said, his voice barely above a whisper, "maybe I've been looking at this all wrong." Keanu smiled again, as if he knew exactly what Liam was feeling. It's never too late to change your perspective. As the afternoon sun began to set, Liam found himself standing in that park, surrounded by strangers, but for the first time, he didn't feel alone. The world around him had shifted, and he knew, without a doubt, that it was just the beginning of a journey that would change everything. For the first time in his life, Liam didn't want to just be seen. He wanted to see others. Liam couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed within him. His encounter with Keanu had opened up a door he didn't even know existed, and now, he couldn't go back. Every day, as he went through his usual routine, something felt off. His usual world of parties, material wealth, and status had lost its shine, and no matter how hard he tried to ignore it, the emptiness began to feel unbearable. He spent hours wandering the city, sometimes finding himself in places he'd never noticed before. The small coffee shops, the crowded parks, the homeless shelters tucked away behind busy streets. Everywhere he went, he saw people giving, helping, offering what little they had with no expectation of anything in return. And for the first time, Liam understood what Keanu had meant. It wasn't about the applause, the recognition, or the spotlight. It was about the quiet, humble moments that truly made a difference. But it was more than just seeing these acts of kindness. It was feeling them, feeling how disconnected he had been from the world around him. His entire life, he had lived in a bubble, surrounded by luxury and superficiality. But now, that bubble felt suffocating. It was during one of these moments of reflection that Liam's phone buzzed. He glanced down at the screen, seeing a message from his father. "I need to talk to you. Meet me at the office tomorrow." Liam's stomach churned. He hadn't heard from his father in weeks. The old man had always been a figure of authority, a businessman who never seemed to have time for family. It was always about the next deal, the next big move. Liam had spent most of his life trying to earn his approval, but it had never been enough. And now, something told him that whatever his father wanted to say, it wouldn't be good. The next day, Liam arrived at his father's office, a sleek glass building that towered over the city. As he stepped into the waiting area, the familiar smell of expensive leather and polished wood hit him. Everything about this place screamed success, at least, the kind of success his father valued. "Liam," his father's voice called from behind the door, snapping him out of his thoughts. He walked into the office, his father sitting behind a massive mahogany desk, the faintest hint of stress in his eyes. For a moment, Liam wondered if his father had aged. The man who once seemed invincible, untouchable, now looked vulnerable. "Sit down," his father said, his voice flat, almost weary. Liam did as instructed, the unease growing with each passing second. "Liam, I need to tell you something," his father began, his hands folded neatly on the desk. "I've made some decisions that might affect you more than you realize." Liam sat up straighter. His heart began to race. What kind of decisions? His father exhaled slowly. "I've been negotiating with a few of my business partners, and I've come to a conclusion that may change the direction of the company." He paused for a long time before continuing. "I'm retiring." Liam blinked, unable to process the words. "What do you mean, retiring? You can't just retire. You've built this empire. You're the one who runs everything." His father nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving Liam's. "It's time. I've been thinking about it for a long time, and I've realized that I've missed too much of your life." I've sacrificed too much for the business, and I don't want to make the same mistake with you. Liam's mind raced. This wasn't the conversation he had expected. His father had always been distant, obsessed with his career. To hear him say that he wanted to step away, for Liam, was a shock to his system. I don't know what to say, Liam whispered, his voice cracking. I've never really felt like you cared about anything but business. His father's face softened, and for the first time, Liam saw a glimpse of something more human in him. I know, son, and I regret that more than you know. But now, I want to make things right. I want to spend time with you. I want us to build a relationship, not just a legacy. Liam's chest tightened. The weight of his father's words hit him like a wave, and for a moment, he didn't know how to respond. He had spent his entire life trying to earn his father's approval, only to realize that the one thing his father had truly wanted all along was something that money couldn't buy. His time, his attention, his love. I don't know what to say, Liam repeated, his voice trembling now. His father looked at him, his expression softening. You don't need to say anything, son. Just know that I'm here, and I want to make up for lost time. I want to help you find your way. Liam's heart swelled with emotions he didn't know how to process. His father, this man who had always been so cold, so focused on success, was offering him something he had never imagined, a chance for a real connection. But as he sat there, the truth hit him like a jolt. This moment wasn't just about his father. It was about him, about what he had been living for all these years. And for the first time, he understood that no amount of money, no amount of status, could replace the human connection he had been missing. Liam looked at his father, his eyes suddenly filled with clarity. Maybe I've been chasing the wrong things all along. Maybe it's time to change. His father nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. It's never too late, son. As Liam left the office that day, his mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. He had always believed that success was defined by wealth, status, and power. But now, he saw the world in a new light. It wasn't the material things that made life meaningful. It was the connections, the moments of kindness, and the willingness to give without expecting anything in return. And as he stepped out into the world once more, Liam felt the weight of his past begin to lift. For the first time in his life, he was ready to embrace the unknown and to change the course of his own journey. Liam's life didn't change overnight. It wasn't like the movies, where everything magically falls into place after an epiphany. But there was a shift, a subtle transformation that began to shape the way he viewed the world and, more importantly, the way he interacted with it. In the weeks that followed his conversation with his father, Liam took small steps toward reimagining his life. He started attending charity events, not because they were high-profile, but because he wanted to be a part of something that mattered. He reached out to people he had ignored in the past, people who had real stories to tell. Instead of hiding behind the comfort of his designer clothes and his carefully curated image, Liam began to embrace vulnerability. He volunteered at shelters, spent time with the homeless, and took part in community projects that required actual effort, not just donations. He also made a conscious effort to reconnect with his family. His relationship with his father, once strained and distant, slowly started to heal. They spent weekends together, not talking about business but about life, about the things that really mattered. His father wasn't perfect, and neither was Liam, but they were learning to meet each other halfway. For the first time, they had conversations that felt real, meaningful. And then, one rainy afternoon, a message from Keanu appeared on his phone, a simple text that read, "I'm doing a small event for a local shelter tomorrow. Would love for you to join me." Liam's heart skipped a beat. Keanu had become a symbol of everything Liam had been striving for: authenticity, generosity, and the ability to make a difference without expecting anything in return. But now, it wasn't about impressing Keanu or seeking his approval. It was about showing up for the people who needed it most, for the cause that had opened Liam's eyes to what truly mattered. When he arrived at the shelter, the sight of Keanu was still as disarming as the first time he'd met him. But this time, there was no awe or fanfare in Liam's eyes. There was respect. There was understanding. They greeted each other warmly, and Keanu's smile was as genuine as ever. "Glad you could make it," Keanu said, his voice steady and kind. "I wouldn't miss it," Liam replied, feeling an unfamiliar sense of peace settle in his chest. They spent the afternoon working side by side, serving meals, talking to the residents, and helping set up for an evening of entertainment and community building. There were no cameras, no social media posts about the event, just people coming together to make a difference. And as the evening went on, Liam realized something that had eluded him for so long. This was what it meant to live a fulfilling life. Not the wealth, not the status, but the connection, the shared humanity. By the time the event was over, Liam felt different. He had walked into the shelter with uncertainty, but he left with a sense of purpose. The weight of his old life, the one built on shallow pursuits, no longer felt like something he needed to carry. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone. All that mattered now was how he chose to show up for others, and for himself. As he sat in his car that evening, waiting for the rain to subside, Liam thought about the journey he had been on. It had started with a simple, unexpected encounter, a moment of generosity from someone he had once mocked. But that moment had changed him, had cracked open a part of him he didn't know existed. And now, he was on the path towards something far greater than anything money could buy. He picked up his phone and typed a message to his father. "Thanks for everything. I think I'm starting to understand what you meant. Let's grab lunch tomorrow." As he hit send, he felt a quiet but profound sense of peace. He had no idea where this journey would take him next, but for the first time in his life, he was no longer afraid to find out. The following day, he met his father at their favorite diner, a modest place that served the best pancakes in the city. As they sat across from each other, sharing a meal that felt more like a conversation than a formality, Liam realized how far he had come. He wasn't the same person who had walked into that office weeks ago, seeking approval. He was someone new, someone who understood that life was about more than the things you had, the money you made, or the status you achieved. It was about the connections you formed, the people you helped, and the moments of kindness that changed everything. And as he looked across the table at his father, a sense of gratitude washed over him. Life was unpredictable, full of twists and turns, but in that moment, he knew that he had found something worth living for, something real. He smiled at his father. "I think we've both got some catching up to do." And for the first time in a long while, Liam wasn't just smiling for show. It was a smile that came from the heart, a smile that reflected everything he had learned along the way. Life wasn't perfect. It wasn't always easy, but it was full of possibilities. And that, Liam realized, was the most valuable thing of all. As the weeks passed, Liam found himself evolving in ways he never imagined possible. The world that had once been his oyster, his playground of wealth, privilege, and instant gratification, had started to feel hollow. The grand parties and designer clothes were no longer enough to fill the empty spaces inside him. And the more he immersed himself in helping others, the more he realized that the real joy came not from what you owned, but from what you gave. One Saturday afternoon, Liam sat in the small park across the street from the shelter, reflecting on how much his life had shifted. It was a crisp fall day, the kind of day that made you appreciate the warmth of a cup of coffee and the vibrant colors of the leaves on the trees. He was meeting Keanu later that afternoon to discuss a new initiative, a foundation that would help provide resources for homeless youth. Keanu had asked him to be a part of it, and although Liam had no prior experience in such matters, he felt drawn to the idea. It was time for him to step up, to do something meaningful with his life. But as he sat there, lost in thought, his phone buzzed. It was a message from his mother, a woman who had always been a figure in the background of his life. She had never been a major part of the glamorous world he was so used to, and they had drifted apart in recent years. But now, her message seemed different. "Liam, I need to talk to you. Can we meet?" Liam hesitated for a moment. He hadn't spoken to her in months, and even though he had been working on repairing his relationship with his father, his mother had always been a harder nut to crack. She had always been the quiet one, the one who stayed out of the limelight. But something about her message felt urgent. He quickly typed a response, "Sure, where?" A few minutes later, they agreed to meet at a cafe he used to visit as a child. It was one of those small, cozy places where the barista knew your name and where the smell of freshly baked croissants filled the air. Liam arrived a bit early, unsure of what to expect. The cafe hadn't changed much over the years, but the feeling in his chest was different now. There was a knot in his stomach as he thought about his mother, the person who had always been a bit of a mystery to him. When she arrived, he noticed how much she had aged. She still looked beautiful, but there was a sadness in her eyes that he hadn't noticed before. She smiled when she saw him, but it was a thin, fragile smile. They exchanged pleasantries, and then she motioned for them to sit. "I've been thinking a lot about you," she began, her voice soft, "and about everything that's happened." Liam waited, unsure of what she meant. "What do you mean?" She sighed, looking down at her hands before meeting his gaze. "I know I haven't been around much, and I know I've let you down in the past, but I've been doing some reflecting too, and I want to make things right." Liam's heart skipped a beat. Was this really happening? His mother, the woman who had always been so distant, was sitting across from him, acknowledging the distance between them. "You've been through so much," she continued, "and I've been so caught up in my own world that I never took the time to really see you, to see what you were going through. I know I failed you in that way." Liam swallowed hard, the words hitting him like a wave. "It's not your fault. I've been so caught up in trying to live up to some idea of who I should be. I didn't know how to reach out to you either." She reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "We both have a lot to work through, but I'm here now, and I want to help you, Liam. I want to be a part of your life, not just a background figure." Liam felt a lump form in his throat. This wasn't just about fixing his relationship with his mother. It was about healing the wounds that had festered for years. He had spent so much of his life trying to prove something to others, to earn their love and respect. But now, he realized that the most important thing was healing the relationships that mattered most. His father, his mother, and even himself. "I think we both have a lot to learn," he said quietly, his voice filled with emotion. "But I'm willing to try." They spent the rest of the afternoon talking, really talking, about the past, the present, and what the future might look like. It wasn't a perfect conversation. There were moments of silence, moments of uncertainty, but there was also a newfound openness. For the first time in a long time, Liam felt like he was truly seen, not for his wealth or status, but for who he was. As he left the cafe that day, Liam felt a weight lift off his shoulders. The journey of healing hadn't been easy, and it certainly wasn't over. But he was beginning to understand that it was okay to be imperfect, that it was okay to struggle. What mattered was the willingness to change, to grow, and to make amends where possible. He pulled out his phone and sent a message to Keanu. "I'm in. Let's make this foundation happen. I'm ready." The days that followed were filled with planning, meetings, and late-night brainstorming sessions. Liam wasn't just a passive participant anymore. He was fully invested. The foundation would provide resources, education, and support for homeless youth, helping them to build a future outside of the circumstances they had been born into. It wasn't just about giving money. It was about creating real opportunities for real people. And as the foundation began to take shape, Liam couldn't help but feel a deep sense of fulfillment. The journey wasn't about fame or fortune. It was about the lives he was touching, the difference he was making. And that, he realized, was more than enough. Liam wasn't the same person who had laughed at Keanu for picking up a fallen loaf of bread. He wasn't the same person who had judged others based on what they wore or how much money they had. He was someone new, someone who had learned that the true measure of a person was in how they treated others, in the kindness they showed, in the way they gave without expecting anything in return. As he looked at the work he had done so far, he smiled. This was just the beginning. The path ahead was long, but for the first time, he was ready for whatever came next. Because he knew that no matter where the journey took him, he had found his true purpose. And that was worth everything. Liam's life had come a long way since that fateful day when he laughed at Keanu Reeves for picking up a fallen loaf of bread. He wasn't just a rich kid with an ego anymore. He had become a man who understood the value of humility, compassion, and the true meaning of success. The foundation had grown, attracting attention from influential figures in the world of philanthropy. The work they were doing had started to make a tangible difference, helping countless homeless youth gain access to education, housing, and mentorship. But for Liam, the real victory wasn't in the media coverage or the generous donations that poured in. It was in the small moments, the quiet interactions he had with the people they were helping. He'd been to the shelters, sat with young people who had once been like him, living in a bubble of privilege, unable to understand the struggles of the world around them. But now, he was there with them, sharing stories, listening, and offering the kind of support that changed lives. He could see the hope in their eyes, a hope that hadn't existed before. It wasn't just about giving them resources. It was about showing them that they mattered, that they had potential, and that someone cared enough to help them realize it. As the foundation grew, Liam found himself taking on more responsibilities. He had stepped into a leadership role, guiding the direction of the organization and ensuring that their work remained focused on their core mission, giving young people the opportunity to create a better future for themselves. He worked alongside Keanu, who had become not only a mentor but a true friend. The bond they shared was one of mutual respect, built on shared values and a deep understanding of what it meant to make a real difference in the world. But despite all the success, Liam never lost sight of what had truly brought him to this point. He had spent years chasing the wrong things: money, status, and admiration. But now, he understood that real fulfillment came from the impact you made on others, the love you gave, and the connections you forged along the way. One evening, as Liam sat in the office of the foundation, reviewing a new partnership proposal, he received a call. It was from his father. "Hey, Liam." His father's voice came through the phone. "I've been thinking. We should do something together. Something that really gives back to the community. I know we've had our differences, but I think we're both in a place where we can make something meaningful happen." Liam smiled to himself. This was the conversation he had been waiting for. The moment when his father, too, realized that their legacy didn't have to be built on wealth and power alone. They could build something that would outlast all of that, something that would impact lives long after they were gone. "I agree, Dad," Liam replied, his voice full of conviction. "Let's make it happen. I think it's time for us to work together on something that matters." And so, a new chapter began, not just for Liam, but for his entire family. Together, they launched a new initiative under the foundation, focusing on providing scholarships for low-income students and creating mentorship programs to help guide them towards successful careers. It wasn't easy, and there were setbacks along the way, but Liam was no longer afraid of challenges. He had learned to embrace them, to face them head-on with the same resilience that had carried him through so many other struggles in life. As the months went by, the work they did together continued to make a profound impact. But for Liam, the true measure of success was found not in the number of programs they launched or the amount of money they raised. It was in the personal stories: the young person who had graduated from college because of their scholarship, the homeless teen who had found a stable job thanks to the mentorship program. These were the moments that made all the hard work worth it. One day, Liam sat in the office with Keanu, reflecting on everything they had achieved. The foundation was thriving, and their mission was more relevant than ever. They were changing lives, one person at a time. "You know," Liam said, leaning back in his chair, "I never would have believed it if someone had told me a year ago that I'd be sitting here, talking about making a real difference in the world." Keanu chuckled, a warm, genuine laugh. "It's funny how life works, isn't it? You never know where the journey will take you. But I'm glad you're on this path now." Liam nodded, a sense of contentment washing over him. He thought about everything that had led him here: the arrogance, the humbling experiences, the moments of growth, and the lessons learned. And most of all, he thought about Keanu, who had shown him what it meant to live a life of purpose, not just success. "Yeah," Liam said with a grin, "I'm glad too." As the foundation continued to grow, so did Liam. He no longer saw himself as the rich teen with everything to prove. He saw himself as someone who had the power to change lives, someone who understood that real wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in the impact you made on others. And as he looked out over the city, knowing that his work was far from finished, Liam realized that he had found something more valuable than anything money could buy. He had found his true legacy. The journey had come full circle, and the future was brighter than ever. And that was the most fulfilling thing of all.